The night was quiet, and the sky above the small town was filled with stars. Ethan, a young mechanic, had just finished his long day of work in his small garage. He loved fixing cars and engines. But on this night, he felt a strange pull to walk into the forest that stood behind his home. It was unusual for him to go there at this hour, but something in his heart told him to move. As he walked deeper into the trees, he heard a sound unlike anything he had ever heard before. It was not thunder, and it was not the sound of an airplane. It was sharp, heavy, and filled with power. The ground under his feet trembled, and birds flew up into the dark sky. Ethan froze, his heart racing. Then he saw a flash of blue light, cutting through the forest as if lightning had struck. He followed the glow, step by step, fear mixing with curiosity. Soon, he reached a clearing where the trees had been torn apart. In the middle of the broken ground, half buried in smoke and fire, lay a massive ship. It was unlike any machine he had ever seen. Its surface was silver, but it seemed alive, shifting as if breathing. Strange symbols glowed on its side, words of a language he could not read. Ethan's mouth went dry. He whispered to himself, "This is not from Earth." His hand shook as he touched the edge of the broken craft. The metal was warm, almost pulsing like skin. He wanted to run, but he could not. Something inside told him he had been chosen to find this. From inside the wreck, a faint sound came. It was not metal breaking. It was voices, low and strange. Ethan stepped back, his mind screaming at him to leave, but his heart pulled him forward. He climbed through a gap in the hull. The air inside smelled sharp, like burning wires and something unknown. In the dim glow, he saw figures, tall and thin, their bodies covered in strange armor. Their faces were unlike any humans, with eyes larger and brighter than stars. Their skin shimmered as if made of crystal and shadow. They were hurt, struggling, some lying weakly on the floor. One of them looked at him directly, their gaze piercing into his soul. Ethan stumbled, almost falling. I don't understand you, he said. The alien raised a trembling hand, pointing at the broken walls of the ship. Sparks rained down from above. The ship groaned, as if alive and dying at the same time. He understood, not with words, but with feeling. They needed help. He was just a mechanic, a human with grease under his nails and scars on his hands. But here, in this moment, he was the only one who could try. Fear pressed on him like a heavy stone. Every story he had heard about aliens, every warning from movies and books, screamed inside his head. They could be dangerous. They could kill him. But then he looked again at their broken forms, at their desperate eyes, and he knew they were not enemies. They were survivors. He whispered to himself, "If I walk away now, they die." His heart beat faster, and his hand stopped shaking. He moved closer, slowly, showing he meant no harm. One alien, taller than the others, gave a weak nod, as if granting permission. Ethan pulled a small flashlight from his pocket. Its beam cutting through the smoke, he examined the broken walls and shattered wires. To his shock, he saw something familiar. Circuits, engines, systems. They were far more advanced than anything on Earth, but their heart was the same, machines that could be fixed. Hope lit up in his chest. He turned back to the aliens. "I can try," he said softly. Even though they could not understand his words, his voice carried a promise. And somehow, they seemed to hear it. The forest outside was silent, but inside the ship, sparks kept falling. Time kept slipping. Ethan knew that this was only the beginning. His life, once simple and ordinary, had just changed forever. And as he picked up a broken panel with his bare hands, unaware of the dangers ahead, the stars outside seemed to shine brighter, as if watching him, waiting to see what choice he would make next. Ethan stood in the middle of the broken alien ship, his small flashlight barely strong enough to cut through the thick smoke. The aliens were watching him closely, their glowing eyes following his every move. He felt the weight of their silence pressing on him. Each second that passed was heavy, like time itself was demanding he act. He crouched beside the shattered panels, his fingers traced over wires that looked almost alive, glowing faintly with colors he could not name. The designs were beyond anything human engineers had ever built, yet there was something strangely familiar. It reminded him of the first car engine he had opened as a boy. He remembered the feeling of staring at something complex and broken, and still believing he could make it run again. One alien moved closer, its armor cracked, its breathing uneven. It raised a hand and pointed toward the core of the ship. There, deep inside, a dull red light pulsed, weak and broken. Ethan understood at once. The engine, the heart of this ship, was dying. Without it, nothing else would matter. He whispered to himself, "You need me to fix this." His voice trembled, but when he looked up, the alien gave the slightest nod. That single gesture was enough to spark courage in him. Ethan pulled out his small toolkit. He had carried out of habit, never thinking he would use it inside something not of this world. His tools looked tiny and powerless against the massive alien machine. Still, he began. His hands moved with care, testing, twisting, studying the shapes and patterns. The aliens shifted uncomfortably. Some of them murmured sounds he could not understand. He felt their doubt like a shadow over his shoulders. He knew what they were thinking. How could a human with primitive tools hope to save a ship that had crossed the stars? But Ethan was not just any man. He was a mechanic who had spent his whole life solving problems others gave up on. He started with small systems, tracing energy lines, finding broken circuits. He found a section that controlled lights, sparks still dancing across its broken edges. With quick work, he rewired them, using his tools and scraps of metal he found near the wreckage. It was a gamble, but when he tightened the last connection, a faint glow spread across the chamber. The lights flickered on, dim but alive. The aliens stared in surprise. Their glowing eyes widened. And for the first time since he entered, Ethan saw hope on their faces. One of them let out a sound that seemed softer, less threatening, almost like gratitude. He smiled nervously. "See, it's not impossible." Even though they could not understand, he felt they somehow did. Encouraged, Ethan pressed deeper into the ship. He found doors that had been sealed shut, machines that refused to respond. With every step, he found a strange balance between human intuition and alien design. He could not read their symbols, but he could feel the logic behind the systems, the way power flowed, the way circuits spoke to each other. It was like music, and he was learning the notes. Hours passed without him noticing. His hands grew dirty. His arms burned from the effort. But he did not stop. Each repair was a step forward, and each success brought trust. The aliens, who had at first doubted him, now followed him with quiet respect. They began to guide him, pointing at sections of the ship, trusting his strange gift to understand. But the deeper he worked, the more he realized the truth. The main engine was shattered beyond simple repair. Pieces were missing, parts were burned, systems that should have been impossible to replace. His human tools could not rebuild alien technology, not fully. For a moment, despair clawed at him. He sat on the floor, sweat dripping down his face. The aliens watched in silence, as if they too felt the same weight of hopelessness. Then he remembered something. Back in his garage, he had always believed in one rule: machines break, but they can also be tricked. If you cannot fix a part, you can make another part take its place. His eyes scanned the wreckage around him, twisted panels, broken rods, melted wires. To the aliens, it was useless junk. To him, it was a treasure chest. He began to collect pieces, shaping them, bending them, forcing them into new roles. A broken panel became a bridge for power. A metal rod became a support for the cracked core. He worked like a man possessed, guided by instinct and stubborn human will. The aliens leaned forward, their eyes glowing brighter as sparks flew around him. Ethan did not stop. His mind was clear, his heart steady. He was no longer afraid. He was doing what he had always done, fixing the impossible. Finally, after what felt like endless hours, he tightened the last connection. The red light at the core flickered, then pulsed stronger. The ground beneath him vibrated as the engine gave a low hum. The entire ship shivered, as if waking from a long dream. Ethan stepped back, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. The aliens stood tall now, their eyes glowing with a strange new light. They looked at him not with doubt, but with respect. One of them placed a hand over its chest and bowed its head slightly. Ethan swallowed hard. "Guess it worked," he whispered, but inside he knew this was only the beginning. He had just proven that a simple human mechanic could fix what even aliens could not. And far above, in the dark sky, unseen by him, other ships were moving, watching, Waiting, his gift had saved lives, but it had also lit a fire that could not be hidden. The hum of the alien ship grew louder, filling the broken chamber with a steady rhythm. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead, his body aching from hours of work. He could hardly believe it himself. The engine was not fully alive, but it was breathing again, like a giant heart starting to beat after almost dying. The aliens gathered around him, their tall figures casting strange shadows across the walls. Their glowing eyes no longer held doubt. Instead, they shone with something different, curiosity, and perhaps even respect. Ethan felt their stares pressing on him, heavy but not hostile. He turned his flashlight toward another section of the ship. A door that had been sealed shut since the crash flickered with faint blue lines. Maybe he could fix it. He stepped forward, but before he could even touch the panel, one of the aliens moved quickly and blocked his way. The alien's face was unreadable, but sharp motion made Ethan freeze. For a moment, fear stabbed his chest. Had he crossed a line? Were they about to attack him? His hands shook as he slowly stepped back. The aliens spoke in their strange language. Voices low, words heavy like echoes. He could not understand, but the tone was clear. They did not want him touching that part of the ship. Ethan raised his hands. Okay, I get it, he said softly. He stepped back further, showing them he meant no harm. The tension in the room thickened. The aliens whispered to each other, their glowing eyes shifting between him and the sealed door. Then, something unexpected happened. The smaller systems he had fixed earlier suddenly sparked again. The lights above flickered brighter, and a wave of energy ran across the ceiling. The aliens froze, their heads turning toward the glow. Ethan glanced up too, his chest tightening with nervous pride. The repairs he had made were holding. The ship was slowly stabilizing. Piece by piece, the aliens turned back to him, this time with something different in their eyes. A tall alien, taller than the rest, stepped forward, its armor cracked and scarred. Its chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. It reached out a long hand and gently touched Ethan's shoulder. The touch was strange, cold and warm at the same time. Ethan stiffened, but then he saw the alien lower its head slightly. It was a gesture of trust, maybe even thanks. The other aliens followed, lowering their heads. Their glowing eyes no longer burned with suspicion. Instead, they glimmered with recognition. Ethan let out a shaky laugh. So, we're good now, he whispered. His heart was still racing, but relief washed through him. For the first time, he felt like he belonged here, not as an intruder, but as someone who mattered. Still, there was more to do. He pointed at the broken walls, the shattered systems, and then at himself, his voice calm. I can fix more. He knew they could not understand the words, but his actions spoke louder. He bent down, pulled his tools again, and returned to work. The aliens did not stop him this time. In fact, they began to assist him. One of them brought a strange, glowing crystal and placed it near him. Ethan realized it worked like a power source. When he connected it to a broken circuit, energy surged, faster and stronger than anything Earth technology could create. He gasped, amazed at the raw power in his hands. With their help, he began repairing sections he had thought impossible. They guided him toward damaged systems, pointing with their long fingers. Sometimes they watched him with silent awe as he turned scraps of wreckage into working parts. Sparks flew, smoke rose, and little by little, the ship started breathing again. But even in this growing trust, tension remained. Once, when Ethan pulled a cable too hard, the ship screamed, a sharp metallic cry that made the walls tremble. The aliens reacted instantly, rushing forward. Their eyes blazed, their voices sharp with warning. Ethan threw up his hands in defense. Wait, I didn't mean it, he shouted. For a moment, the silence was heavy. Then one alien crouched down, showing him a safer way to connect the wires. Its hands moved with delicate precision. Ethan followed, copying its actions. When the system finally steadied, glowing softly, the tension eased again. Trust was not easy, not for them, not for him. But with every spark, with every repair, they were building it. Ethan leaned against the wall, exhausted but satisfied. He looked at the aliens and smiled. Guess we make a good team, he whispered. They tilted their heads, not understanding his words, but their eyes said enough. They understood the meaning. Still, Deep inside, Ethan knew the hardest part was yet to come. He had seen the broken core, he had seen the deep wounds in the ship. His small fixes were only keeping it alive for now. The real challenge lay ahead, one that would test not just his hands, but his spirit. And as the lights glowed brighter in the alien ship, somewhere far above the forest sky, a shadow moved. Another presence had taken notice of the strange pulse of energy returning to life on Earth. The alien ship was alive again. Though weak, its hum filling the forest with a strange vibration. Ethan leaned against a wall, his hands trembling from exhaustion. He had done so much already, and yet he knew it was only the beginning. The aliens around him no longer looked at him with doubt. They stood close, watching his every move, trusting him now more than ever. Suddenly, the tallest alien stepped forward, its armor cracked, its glowing eyes sharp with urgency. It pointed to the core of the ship, then raised its hand toward the sky. Ethan frowned, not understanding, until another alien activated a flickering screen. The image made his blood run cold. High above Earth, dark shapes moved in space. Ships larger and sharper than the one he had been repairing. Their forms looked like blades of metal, sleek and deadly. They were not just searching, they were hunting. Ethan did not need words to know the truth. Enemies were coming. One alien pressed its hand against its chest, then pointed at Ethan. The meaning was clear. They were depending on him. His repairs had brought them this far. But time was running out. If the ship was not ready to fly, they would all be destroyed. Ethan's heart pounded. His body begged for rest. But he shook his head. No stopping. He whispered. He forced himself back to the core, examining the damage once more. The makeshift bridges he had built were holding, but the engine was still unstable. It needed something stronger, something faster. The aliens brought him strange tools, glowing crystals, and fragments of their broken tech. Ethan's human mind saw patterns where they saw only failure. He began to piece them together like a puzzle. His hands moved quickly, sparks bursting as he forced wires into place. The ship groaned as he worked, a living beast struggling to breathe. Outside, thunder rolled, but it was not a storm. The ground shook as if something far above had entered Earth's atmosphere. Ethan glanced at the flickering screen again. The enemy ships were closer now, slicing through space like predators. Come on, he muttered. His hands were blackened with smoke and grease. His eyes burned from the heat. Every second felt stolen. His chest tightened, fear pressing down, but he pushed harder. He had fixed cars with nothing but tape and wire. He had rebuilt broken machines with scraps. He could do this. He had to. The aliens began to help him more directly. One held a crystal steady as he forced it into a broken power conduit. Another lifted heavy panels so he could crawl into narrow gaps. Their voices filled the chamber, urgent but no longer hostile. Together, they became a team. The engine pulsed brighter, sending a wave of energy across the walls. For a brief moment, hope filled the air, but then alarms blared, sharp and painful. The aliens froze. Ethan spun around. "What now?" he whispered. His answer came quickly. A section of the ship had collapsed during the crash, trapping part of the power system. Without it, the engine would overload. He had minutes, maybe less. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed a piece of alien metal, sharp like a blade, and forced it between the wreckage. His muscles strained as he pushed. The aliens shouted, their voices rising in fear. The wreck groaned, sparks rained down. Finally, with a cry, Ethan shoved the broken mass aside, freeing the system. The lights flared brighter. The engine roared, alive with a new surge. The aliens stared, their glowing eyes wide with shock and relief. Ethan fell back, gasping. His arms felt like fire, but he smiled weakly. "That should do it," he muttered. But there was no time to celebrate. The ship's sensors screamed again. This time, the enemy ships were entering the atmosphere. Fire streaked across the sky. The forest outside shook as the first blast of energy burned through the night. The aliens moved quickly now, rushing to their stations, their voices sharp, commanding. They no longer treated Ethan as an outsider. They gestured for him to follow, guiding him to a seat near the core. He hesitated, but when the ground shook again, he obeyed. Through the cracked walls, Ethan saw the forest burning, bright streaks of light carved across the sky as enemy ships descended like vultures. His chest tightened. "If we don't fly now, it's over," he whispered. The tallest alien stood at the control panel, its glowing hands moving fast. The ship trembled, engines screaming as power surged through every system. Ethan held his breath. Sparks burst above him. Smoke filled the chamber, and the ship began to rise. But the enemies were not blind. They had seen the glow of the rising ship. They turned, their weapons igniting, beams of deadly light cutting across the forest. The ground exploded. Trees vanished in fire. Inside the alien craft, Ethan gripped the seat, his heart pounding so hard he thought it would break. The aliens braced themselves, their eyes burning with determination. The ship roared louder, climbing into the sky. But the enemy was faster. A beam of energy sliced past, shaking the hull. Ethan shouted as sparks rained down again. The aliens struggled at their controls, the engine groaning under the strain. Ethan knew the truth. The repairs he had made were enough to fly, but not enough to fight. If the enemies caught them now, everything he had done would be for nothing. The countdown had begun. The race against time was real, and Ethan, a simple human mechanic, was in the middle of a war he did not understand. The alien ship shook violently as it climbed higher into the night sky. Enemy fire rained down around them. Explosions lighting up the forest below. Ethan gripped the edge of the seat, his knuckles white. His heart raced faster than the engine he had repaired. The aliens worked furiously at the controls, their glowing hands sliding over panels of light. But it was clear the ship was struggling. The engine roared, but the sound was uneven. Every few seconds it coughed, sending sparks through the chamber. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew the truth. The engine was alive, but it was not strong enough. One direct hit, and it would collapse. The aliens glanced at him, their glowing eyes sharp with unspoken meaning. He was the one who had brought the ship this far. Now he had to finish it. Ethan pushed himself up, forcing his tired legs to move. He stumbled toward the core. Smoke filled the chamber. Lights flickered. The tall alien shouted something, its voice heavy with warning. But Ethan waved it off. "If I don't fix this now, we're dead anyway," he muttered. He crawled under the broken panels, the heat burning his skin. The makeshift bridges he had built were bending under the pressure. Sparks danced dangerously close to his face. The engine pulsed like a wounded heart, beating weaker with every passing second. He could feel the enemies closing in. Their blasts rattled the hull, shaking dust and fire loose. Ethan thought back to his garage, to the nights he spent fixing cars for people who could barely afford them. He remembered using scraps and tape to keep an engine running long enough to save someone's livelihood. He remembered believing that no machine was ever beyond hope. He whispered to himself, "Come on, one last fix." He spotted the problem. A crack had spread across the main conduit, leaking energy like blood. The alien crystal he had fitted earlier was shaking, unable to stabilize the flow. Without thinking, Ethan ripped the cracked piece free. The engine screamed. The ship lurched. The aliens shouted in alarm. But Ethan was already moving. He grabbed a shard of alien metal, its edges glowing faintly, and forced it into the gap. His hands burned, but he didn't stop. He wrapped wires around it, twisting, tightening. His tools slipped. Sparks burned his skin. But his focus was absolute. He could feel the energy rushing through his fingers, threatening to tear him apart. The ship roared louder, shaking like a beast in chains. Ethan screamed with the effort, his body trembling. Sweat and smoke stung his eyes. He forced the final connection, slamming his fist against the metal until the wires locked in place. Then, silence for one heartbeat. The engine stopped. Everyone froze. The aliens looked around, their glowing eyes wide with fear. Ethan's chest sank. He began. The ship exploded with life. The engine thundered, stronger and brighter than before. The chamber lit up with blinding light. The cracks healed under the surge of power. The ship steadied, climbing faster, smoother, stronger. The aliens cried out, their voices rising like a chorus. Ethan collapsed back, coughing but laughing weakly. "Told you it could work," he whispered. The tallest alien moved toward him, its glowing eyes fixed on his exhausted form. It bent down, placing its hand gently on Ethan's chest. a gesture of deep respect. The others followed, their heads lowering. They no longer saw him as just a human. He was their savior. But the battle was not over. Outside, the enemy ships closed in, beams of energy cutting across the sky. One blast struck the side of the alien craft, shaking it violently. Ethan was thrown against the wall, pain flaring in his ribs. The aliens rushed back to their stations, the ship groaning under the impact. Ethan dragged himself up again. His body begged him to rest, but his spirit refused. He looked at the engine, glowing bright now, but unstable under the strain of battle. He whispered, "Hold together, just a little longer." The aliens fought to dodge the enemy fire. The ship twisted and turned through the burning sky. Ethan clung to the walls, every jolt reminding him of how fragile their survival was. Yet deep inside, he felt pride. This ship was alive because of him. These beings were alive because of him. Then came the moment of truth. On the screen, the enemies locked their weapons, charging for a final strike. The aliens shouted, their voices sharp with fear. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. He stared at the engine. Glowing like a star, he whispered, "It's all on you now." The enemy blast fired, a beam of pure destruction. The alien ship shook, but the engine roared, brighter, stronger. It carried them forward in a burst of speed. The beam missed, tearing the sky behind them. The ship shot higher, breaking free of the lower atmosphere. Ethan fell to the floor, his chest heaving, his vision blurred. The aliens around him cheered in their strange language, the sound like music through the chaos. The ship was alive. They were alive. And as Ethan lay there, staring at the glowing core, he realized something deep in his heart. This was not just a repair. This was a miracle. The final fix had changed everything. But somewhere beyond the stars, the enemy ships turned to follow. The fight was far from over, and Ethan's journey had only just begun. The alien ship tore through the upper skies, its engines blazing with the strength Ethan had forced into them. The roar echoed like thunder, shaking the very clouds below. Earth shrank into a blur of forests and lights. Above, the stars opened wide, silent witnesses to the desperate flight. Ethan lay against the wall, his chest heaving, his arms ached, his hands burned, yet his eyes stayed sharp. He could not relax. Not yet. The enemy ships were still there, faster, hungrier, slicing through the atmosphere with trails of fire. Their weapons charged, their shadows falling closer. The aliens worked frantically at their stations, voices sharp, glowing eyes flashing with urgency. The tallest among them stood at the command panel, guiding the ship with hands of light. The vessel twisted sharply, beams of destruction flashing past. One strike grazed the side, shaking the chamber and sending sparks raining down. Ethan clutched a railing, his teeth gritted. "We can't take many more hits," he muttered. The aliens seemed to agree. Their gazes turned toward him, as if asking silently for another miracle. Ethan forced himself to his feet, dragging his tired body toward the core once more. The engine glowed bright, but he could see the strain. Every push, every maneuver, stretched it closer to collapse. He whispered, "Come on, hold together." A sudden explosion rocked the ship. An enemy beam had struck near the rear hull. The lights flickered, alarm screamed. Smoke filled the chamber. The aliens shouted, their voices sharp with panic. Ethan's heart pounded. He had to act. He crawled beneath the panels again, his hands moving with instinct. He rerouted power, forcing energy into the damaged systems. Sparks burned his skin, but he ignored the pain. He twisted wires, slammed metal shards into gaps, and willed the machine to live. The ship lurched forward, faster now. The stars blurred as speed returned. The aliens shouted in triumph. But Ethan knew it was only a temporary win. The enemy ships were still behind them, growing closer. He saw them on the screen, dark predators chasing with glowing jaws. Think, Ethan whispered. His mind raced. He remembered the alien crystal he had used earlier, a fragment filled with power beyond anything Earth had ever known. He pulled it free, his hands shaking. He forced it into a new slot, connecting it directly to the stabilizers. The ship screamed in protest, but then it surged forward with raw strength. The aliens gasped as the stars stretched, The vessel shot faster, leaving burning trails behind. For a moment, they were ahead, but the enemies adapted. Their ships split apart, surrounding them from different angles. Weapons charged, beams locking onto their target. Ethan's chest tightened. He had pushed the engine as far as it could go. Yet it was not enough. His eyes darted to the aliens, their glowing stares heavy with fear and hope. He knew they needed more than speed. They needed a trick. He looked at the damaged panels, the broken systems, and an idea struck him. It was dangerous. It was insane, but it was all they had. He grabbed tools, sparks flying as he ripped wires loose. The aliens shouted in alarm, but he ignored them. He rerouted the power, not to the engine, but to the outer hull. He whispered, "If they want a target, I'll give them one." The ship's outer skin lit up with false signals, a decoy. Beams of light flickered across the sky as the enemy locked onto the glowing distraction. The first strike hit, exploding against the false surge. The ship rocked but survived. Ethan grinned through the smoke. "That's right, you missed." The aliens watched him, amazement glowing in their crystal eyes. They had crossed galaxies, built wonders beyond human imagination. Yet here was one mechanic from Earth tricking their enemies with scrap and instinct. The enemy ships regrouped, their weapons charging again. The tallest alien slammed its hand on the control panel, opening a new path. A narrow corridor of stars lit up ahead, a jump route, dangerous and unstable, but their only chance. Ethan felt the ship strain as the engines prepared. The crystals pulsed, the hull groaned. The aliens shouted, their voices rising like a storm. He grabbed the railing, his heart thundering. "Do it," he whispered. The ship roared, leaping into the corridor of light. Stars blurred into streams, space itself bending around them. The enemy ships followed, their shadows stretching close. The corridor shook, unstable and wild. Sparks burst across the panels. Alarms screamed. Ethan tightened his grip, praying his final fix would hold. The enemies drew closer, their weapons glowing. Ethan's mind raced. One last trick, he muttered. He crawled to the core, ripping another shard of crystal from its socket. He jammed it into the engine feed. The ship shrieked, its glow turning blinding white. With a final roar, the vessel surged forward, the light exploding around them. The enemy ships were swallowed in the chaos, their shapes torn apart by the unstable corridor, and then silence. The ship floated into open space, battered but alive. The stars shone bright, peaceful. The aliens stood in silence, their glowing eyes turning to Ethan. He collapsed to his knees, exhausted. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. He whispered with a weak smile, "We made it." The tallest alien approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. Their voices filled the chamber, not sharp or fearful, but soft, almost reverent. Ethan had not just repaired their ship. He had saved their lives. He had earned their trust. But deep in the endless dark, far behind them, a shadow still stirred. The enemies were not gone. They would return, and Ethan's journey was far from over. The silence after the escape was heavy. Only the steady hum of the alien ship filled the chamber. Ethan sat against the wall, his clothes torn, his skin burned with small cuts. Yet his eyes stayed open. He had seen death chasing them. And somehow, he had pulled them all through. The aliens stood in a circle around him. Their glowing eyes watched him with something deeper than gratitude. For them, trust was not easily given, but Ethan had earned it with fire, sweat, and courage. The tallest alien stepped forward, its hand glowing faintly as it touched its chest. Then it extended its hand toward Ethan. Ethan hesitated, but slowly reached out. Their hands met, human and alien, cold and warm, fragile and strong. For a moment, there were no words, only understanding. Days passed in the strange rhythm of the stars. The ship drifted through safe space. Repairs continued with alien precision. Ethan worked beside them, learning more than he thought possible. He watched crystals bend light into energy, metals that healed themselves when broken, systems that seemed half machine, half alive. Every detail filled him with wonder. Yet deep inside, he knew something. They would soon leave. They had their own world, their own war, and he was just one man from Earth, The thought weighed heavy on his chest. Would they forget him? Would this all become just a story lost in stars? But fate had another plan. One night, as the stars burned quietly outside, the aliens gathered again. This time they carried something in their hands. A small device, no larger than his palm. Its surface shimmered with colors that shifted like liquid. They placed it gently before him. Ethan frowned. "What's this?" he whispered. The tallest alien touched the device, and it came alive. A soft hum filled the chamber. Images flickered in the air, maps of stars, unknown worlds, technology beyond human dreams. Ethan gasped. He was not just holding a machine, he was holding knowledge. The alien pointed at him, then at the device. Their meaning was clear. This was his reward, not gold, not jewels, but something far greater, a gift that could change the future of all mankind. Ethan's hands shook as he picked it up. It was light, yet it felt heavy with power. His reflection shimmered across its surface. He whispered, "You're giving this to me." His voice cracked. The aliens bowed their heads. For the first time, Ethan felt the true weight of what he had done. He had not only saved their lives, he had forged a bridge between two worlds. This device was proof of that. But the moment was not only joy. Behind the stars, danger still lingered. He knew the enemies who hunted them would not stop. They would return, stronger, faster, more ruthless. The thought chilled him. Yet when he looked at the device in his hands, he also felt hope. Humanity would not be helpless forever. Not with this gift. When the ship finally descended back toward Earth, the night was silent again. The clearing where it had first crashed was now marked by scorched trees and broken ground. Ethan stood there, the aliens behind him, their ship now healed and shining like a star. The tallest alien stepped close, its glowing eyes fixed on him. A deep hum filled the air. A farewell? Ethan's chest tightened. "Guess this is goodbye," he whispered. The alien touched his shoulder once more, then turned, leading its people back into the ship. The vessel lifted into the sky, slowly at first. Then with a roar, it vanished into the stars, leaving only silence behind. Ethan stood there alone, the strange device clutched in his hand. His heart pounded. He looked up at the endless sky. His life would never be the same. He was no longer just a mechanic fixing cars in a small town. He was the human who had repaired an alien ship, the human who had been trusted with knowledge beyond imagination. The device in his palm glowed softly, pulsing like a heartbeat, a promise of what was to come, a promise that he was no longer alone in the universe. Ethan smiled faintly, despite the exhaustion. "All right," he whispered to himself. "Let's see what we can build." And as the stars shimmered above him, unseen shadows moved far away. The enemies were not gone. They would come again. But when they did, humanity would not be the same. Because one man had been chosen. One mechanic had been rewarded with the gift to change the world.